The scent of old paper and fading ink was the only thing that felt real anymore. Caleb locked the front door of the reader's nook, the soft click of the bolt echoing in the cavernous silence of the empty street. He didn't turn the sign from open to closed. There was no point. This was the last time he would lock this door. Tomorrow the bank would do it for him, their metal chains and cold padlock a final brutal epitaph to a dream that was never his, but one he had sworn to protect. He stood for a moment in the gloom, his hand resting on the cool brass doorknob. Through the glass, the single street lamp cast long skeletal shadows of the bookshelves, making them look like ribs of a great beached whale. This place, this tiny, struggling, independent bookstore, was Amelia's soul made tangible. Every scuffed floorboard held the memory of her footsteps as she'd rushed to help a customer. The faint, almost imaginary scent of lavender that clung to the air in the poetry section was hers. She used to tuck dried sprigs of it into the pages of her favorite books. Grief was no longer a wave that crashed over him. It was the ocean in which he now lived, its pressure constant and crushing. It had been 14 months since he'd lost her, but the wound was as raw as it was on the first day. The illness had been swift and merciless, a thief that stole her light and left him in perpetual twilight. It had also stolen their savings, their security and their future, leaving behind a mountain of debt that had finally avalanched. He walked slowly past the shelves, his fingers ghosting over the spines of books he knew she had loved. 100 Years of Solitude, To the Lighthouse, The Song of Achilles. Each one was a testament to her belief that stories were life rafts. "Books are maps to other souls, Caleb," she would say, her eyes alight with a passion that could have powered the whole town. "They show us we're not alone." He felt profoundly, terrifyingly alone. His gaze fell upon the small, cluttered desk tucked in the back corner. Her desk, a chipped ceramic mug with a cartoon owl, still held a few dried-out pens. A framed photo of them on their wedding day stood beside a teetering stack of catalogues. He and Amelia, impossibly young, her head thrown back in laughter as he dipped her in a field of wildflowers. He looked happy in the photo, a stranger from another lifetime. Now, his reflection in the dark window showed a hollowed-out man of 40, with eyes that had seen too much ending and had forgotten how to look for a beginning. Lying starkly in the center of the desk, atop a pile of unpaid bills, was the envelope. It had arrived that morning, its cold official language a stark contrast to the warmth that had once filled this space. Final notice of eviction. The words were a death sentence. He had failed. He had fought, begged, borrowed, sold his car, and worked until his bones ached, but it wasn't enough. He couldn't save her dream. He couldn't even save himself. Tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., the marshals would come. They would change the locks. Men in overalls would begin the soulless work of boxing up Amelia's life, her carefully curated collection of worlds, and carting it all away to be auctioned off for pennies on the dollar. The thought of their hands touching her books, their indifferent voices discussing the logistics of dismantling her legacy, was a violation he could not bear to witness. A strange calm settled over him, the quiet resignation that comes after a long, lost battle. He knew what he had to do. It wasn't a decision made in a moment of passion, but a conclusion reached after months of treading water in an endless sea of sorrow and failure. There was no shore in sight. To continue struggling was just to prolong the drowning. He moved from the bookstore to the small apartment upstairs that they had shared. It was just as suffocatingly full of her absence. Her favorite armchair, her half-finished knitting project still in its basket, her worn copy of Pride and Prejudice on the nightstand. He walked through the rooms like a ghost, his heart a dead weight in his chest. He sat on the edge of their bed and wrote a short note on the back of a gas bill. There was no one to address it to. His parents were gone, and Amelia had been an only child. They had been each other's entire world. Now half of that world was missing. "I'm sorry," he wrote. "I couldn't hold on." The words were inadequate, pathetic, but they were the only ones he had left. His eyes landed on the bookshelf by the bed. There it was, a dog-eared, well-loved copy of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. It had been Amelia's Bible. On nights when she couldn't sleep, she would read passages aloud, her voice a soothing melody that filled the quiet space between them. "I sing the body electric," she would whisper, tracing the words with her finger. He picked it up, the worn cover soft beneath his fingertips. He needed to hold it one last time. Opening it, he saw her delicate, looping signature on the inside cover. Amelia Rose, her book, her world, and tucked inside, used as a bookmark for the poem, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," was a slip of paper he had completely forgotten. A lottery ticket. He remembered buying it weeks ago, maybe a month. He'd been at the corner store next to the bookstore, buying milk he could barely afford. The jackpot was enormous, a ridiculous, life-altering sum. The man in front of him bought 10 tickets, talking excitedly about what he'd do with the money. On a whim of pure, desperate fantasy, Caleb had used the last few dollars in his pocket to buy one. He'd chosen the numbers randomly, a jumble of their anniversary, her birthday, the address of the bookstore, meaningless digits in a meaningless game. He'd come home, tucked it into the first book he'd touched, and forgotten all about it. A fool's hope, discarded and lost. It felt like a cruel joke from the universe, a reminder of a fleeting moment of hope in an existence that had become devoid of it. He almost crumpled it, but something stopped him. He just stared at it, this flimsy receipt for a fantasy. The silence in the apartment pressed in. It was too absolute. He needed a voice, any voice, to fill the void before he took the final step. He fumbled for the remote and switched on the small television in the corner, keeping the volume low. It was the late-night news. The anchor's sterile voice, a meaningless drone, weather reports, local politics, a story about a cat stuck in a tree, background noise for the end of a life. He placed the note on the nightstand and held the book to his chest, closing his eyes, trying to summon Amelia's face, her voice. He wanted her to be his last thought. And in other news, tonight's much-anticipated Powerball drawing has a single winning ticket sold right here in the state, the news anchor said, her voice cutting through his fog. Caleb's eyes remained closed. It didn't matter. None of it mattered. The winning numbers are... He braced himself, the book his only anchor. This was it. A few more moments of quiet, a final breath, and then peace. The anchor's voice became unnaturally clear, as if she was speaking directly to him. 4, 8, 15, 21, 33. A flicker. The number 4. The month of their wedding, April. He dismissed it. A coincidence. His grieving mind playing tricks on him. And the Powerball is 19. His breath hitched. 19. The day he had proposed to her. His eyes snapped open. The lottery ticket was still in his hand, resting against the cover of the book. His fingers trembled so violently he could barely hold it steady. He fumbled to open the book again, the ticket falling into his lap. He stared at the numbers he had circled in cheap blue ink weeks ago. He looked from the ticket to the screen, where the winning numbers were displayed in a bright, garish line. They were the same, and the Powerball. 19. A roaring sound filled his ears, drowning out the television, drowning out everything. The room tilted, the walls seeming to warp and bend. He stared at the flimsy piece of paper in his shaking hand, then back at the screen. It couldn't be real. It was a hallucination, a final, feverish dream before the end. But the ticket was solid in his hand, the ink was real, and the anchor was now smiling, saying something about a jackpot worth $247 million. The note he had written, his final apology to the world, lay on the nightstand, its 2 small sentences suddenly the most absurd thing he had ever seen. The book, Amelia's book, had fallen open in his lap. And from its pages, a forgotten ticket and a dead poet's words seemed to scream at him, not of endings, but of a sudden, terrifying, and impossible beginning. For a long time, Caleb didn't move. He sat on the edge of the bed, the world reduced to the slip of paper in his lap and the glowing numbers on the screen. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, wild drum beat replacing the slow, funereal toll that had echoed in his chest for months. He checked the numbers again and again. He held the ticket so close to his face the ink blurred. He looked at the TV, then back at the ticket, his head whipping back and forth as if watching a tennis match between madness and reality. It had to be a mistake, a cruel, elaborate trick of a mind breaking under pressure. Yet the numbers remained stubbornly, impossibly the same. 4, 8, 15, 21, 33, Powerball 19. The news anchor had moved on, now chatting cheerfully about an upcoming festival. The ordinary world was continuing, oblivious to the seismic event that had just occurred in his small, grief-stricken apartment. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers clumsy and numb. He pulled up the official lottery website. The page loaded with agonizing slowness, and there they were again, the same digits presented in the sterile, undeniable finality of the web. One winner. Jackpot. 247 million. A sound escaped his throat, a choked, guttural noise that was half sob, half laugh. It was real, the crushing weight of debt that was suffocating him, the eviction that was hours away, the gnawing, relentless despair. It was all predicated on a reality that no longer existed. He had been standing on a cliff edge, ready to jump, only to find out the chasm had vanished. His gaze fell on the note he had written. "I'm sorry. I couldn't hold on." The words seemed to mock him now, a relic from a man who had died in the last 10 minutes. He snatched it, his hands still trembling, and tore it into tiny, unrecognizable pieces, letting them flutter into the wastebasket like bitter confetti. It was a symbolic act, but it felt monumental. He had just unwritten his own end. But the morning was still coming. The money was an abstract concept, a number on a screen. The eviction was a concrete threat, scheduled for 8 a.m. He looked at the clock. It was just after 11 p.m. He had 9 hours. What did a person do in this situation? He couldn't just show the marshals a lottery ticket. They would laugh him out of the building. He needed a plan. He needed to think. He paced the small apartment, the lottery ticket clutched in his hand like a sacred relic. The adrenaline surging through him was a long-dormant feeling, electric and terrifying. For the first time in over a year, he wasn't just reacting to grief, he was faced with a choice, an impossible, overwhelming choice. First things first. He took a deep breath, forcing the air into his tight lungs. He found the bank's eviction notice on the desk downstairs. There was a name and a number for the law firm handling the proceedings. He knew they wouldn't be open, but he left a message anyway, his voice cracking with a strange mixture of desperation and newfound authority. "My name is Caleb Miller, regarding the eviction at 112 Oak Street, the Reader's Nook. There has been a significant change in my financial situation. I will be settling the outstanding debt in full. Call me first thing in the morning to arrange the wire transfer." He hung up, his heart pounding. It was a tiny step, a shot in the dark, but it was an action. It was a claim on the future. He didn't sleep. He couldn't. He spent the night in Amelia's armchair, the lottery ticket and her copy of Leaves of Grass on his lap. The apartment, which had felt like a tomb, now felt like a waiting room. He was waiting for a life he never asked for. A life he had been actively trying to escape just hours before. He thought about Amelia. What would she say? He could almost hear her voice, calm and steady amidst his chaos. "Well, Cal, it seems you have a story to finish." At 7:45 a.m., there was a sharp, authoritative knock on the bookstore's front door. Caleb's blood ran cold. He had been so caught up in the surreal nature of the night that the reality of the morning was a physical shock. He looked through the window of the upstairs apartment and saw them, 2 grim-faced men in jackets, holding a clipboard, the marshals. He walked down the stairs, his legs feeling like lead. He opened the door, his hand shaking on the knob. "Caleb Miller?" the taller man asked, his tone flat, devoid of emotion. "Yes," Caleb managed to say, his voice a hoarse whisper. "We have an order to secure the premises." This was it, the moment of truth. His frantic voicemail from the middle of the night felt like a flimsy shield against their legal authority. "There's been a mistake," he began, but the words sounded weak, rehearsed. Just then, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. "Sir, there's no mistake," the marshal said, already reaching for the large, official-looking sticker to place on the door. "We need you to vacate." The phone buzzed again, insistently. An unknown number. On a desperate impulse, he answered it. "Hello? Is this Mr. Caleb Miller?" A sharp, professional voice asked. "This is Catherine Shaw from the firm of Davies, Shaw and Associates. I'm the attorney for the bank. I just got your very unusual message from last night." Caleb's throat was dry. "Yes, I told you. I can pay it. All of it." There was a pause on the other end. He could hear the skepticism in the silence. "Mr. Miller, the amount is over $100,000. With all due respect, unless you can provide proof of funds immediately." The marshals were watching him, their patience clearly wearing thin. "I won the lottery," Caleb blurted out, the words sounding insane even to his own ears. The silence on the other end of the line was longer this time. He imagined the lawyer rolling her eyes. The tall marshal took a step forward. "Sir, we need to proceed." "Wait," Caleb said, both to the man and the voice on the phone. He took a photo of the ticket with his phone and texted it to the number. "Look, just look. The winning Powerball ticket from last night. The jackpot was $247 million. The numbers match. The ticket was sold in this state. It's real." He could hear frantic typing on the other end of the line. The marshals exchanged a look of weary disbelief. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Then the lawyer's voice came back, all the skepticism gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Stay right there, Mr. Miller. Do not let those men do anything. I'm calling the bank president. I'm calling them off right now." Caleb relayed the message to the marshals, who looked at him as if he'd just announced he was from Mars. But a moment later, the taller man's phone rang. He listened, his eyes widening slightly. He mumbled a "yes, sir," and hung up. He looked at Caleb, then at the bookstore, then back at Caleb, his professional mask completely shattered. "Well, have a nice day, Mr. Miller," he said, before turning and walking away, his partner following in stunned silence. Caleb stood in the doorway, the morning sun on his face, and watched them go. He had done it. He had saved the store. He had saved Amelia's dream. He leaned against the doorframe, a wave of relief so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. He looked up at the faded sign, the Reader's Nook, and for the first time in a very long time, he smiled. Not the ghost of a smile, but a real one that reached his tired eyes. The weeks that followed were a blur of lawyers, financial advisors, and media avoidance. He took the lump sum payment. The number that appeared in his new bank account had so many zeros, it seemed fictional. But Caleb moved through it all in a daze, his focus singular. He paid off the bookstore's debt. He paid off the medical bills that had haunted him. And then, with the foundations of his old life secured, he had to figure out what to do with the new one. He could have sold the store and traveled the world, living a life of quiet, anonymous luxury. But that felt like another kind of ending, another way of running away. Amelia hadn't built the bookstore just to own it. She built it to share it. He started by simply keeping the doors open. But then he started to dream. He used the money to renovate, not to modernize it into something sterile, but to restore its warmth and magic. He expanded the children's section, creating a whimsical space with beanbags and a small stage for story time. He established the Amelia Rose Literacy Foundation, funding reading programs in underserved local schools and donating thousands of books. He hosted author events, poetry slams, and community gatherings, filling the once quiet space with voices and laughter. He didn't just save the bookstore. He brought its soul back to life. It became more than a business. It was a sanctuary, a hub of connection, exactly as Amelia had always envisioned. One crisp autumn afternoon, about a year after that fateful night, Caleb was standing behind the counter, helping a young girl choose a book. The store was humming with life. A group of teenagers were debating a fantasy novel in one corner, and an elderly man was reading peacefully in an armchair by the window. Caleb felt a sense of peace he thought he had lost forever. He was no longer the ghost haunting Amelia's memory. He was the guardian of her legacy, and in doing so, he had finally found his own reason to live. His eyes drifted to the photo of him and Amelia on the desk, the same one from his darkest hour. He looked at the laughing woman in the field of wildflowers, and the hollow ache of her absence was filled with a profound sense of gratitude. The lottery ticket hadn't just saved his life. It had given him a purpose. It had been a second chance, a key to a door he didn't even know was there. Amelia had always told him that books were maps to other souls. He finally understood. She had left him a map, tucked inside her favorite book, leading him not to a different soul, but back to his own. True luck isn't about winning a fortune, but about receiving a second chance when all hope seems lost. Caleb's story teaches us that even in the deepest darkness, a single flash of light can remind us of our purpose and give us the strength to rewrite our own ending. The money was the tool, but the rediscovery of a love for life and the legacy of those we cherish was the true prize. If Caleb's story resonated with you, help us share more inspiring narratives by liking this video and subscribing to the channel.